Major General Shamaal, welcome to India again. I do believe about a couple of weeks back, I interviewed the South Sudanese Vice President as well, and it's been really hot in Delhi. And even at that point, it was raining. You've also brought the rain with you here. But like in January, this is quite a extensive tour that you're having. That, of course, was with Defence Minister Maria Didi.
Yes, first of all, thank you very much, Mr. Amitabh. It is absolute pleasure to see you again and then to express my views. Yes, I had visited with the Honorable Defence Minister in January, and it was also a defining moment because both of us traveled together, and then it sort of created synergy. And then it's within the last span of almost 8 months. This is my second visit to India, and that shows the importance we attach to the relations between the two countries, especially the security relations between the two countries.
And this time you've had top level meetings. The Defence Minister Rajnath Singh has changed. His last time, Nirmala Sitharaman is now presenting the budget here. You met the NSA Doval, you've met all three chiefs of staff and the chairman of the Joint Staff Committee.
Yes, my visit is on the invitation of the chairman, chief of staff committee, who happens to be the air chief. And I had met with the army chief, chief of army staff. I had met with the chief of naval staff, who happens to be, who has just taken over the new command of the Navy. And then interestingly, with the Honorable Defence Minister, the new Defence Minister, and then and as well as the National Security Advisor, as you have mentioned. And in fact, we've had extremely fruitful and productive meetings and sessions. We've talked about how, based on our meetings in January, this time we've focused more on operationalizing the structures, how we could shape up the defense and security cooperation relationship between the two countries, and concerns. We expressed and talked about concerns as far as the Indian Ocean region security is concerned. So these meetings have been quite rewarding and extremely productive.
You were talking about your and the defense minister's travel here in January. Well, post that, there's been an even more defining visit with the Prime Minister visiting Male, the first foreign visit after he won a second term as well.
Yes, certainly the Honorable Prime Minister, after swearing in, his first destination abroad was Maldives.
Just by the way, I won a bet among our colleagues because we were all betting before, which would be the first country.
And yes, and then in fact our President, Excellency Ibrahim Mohammed Saleh, also visited, chosen India as his first destination. This shows the importance we attach to this relationship. You see, the traditional linkages, historic relationship, and then cultural ties, and more importantly, the geography. Because within the underbelly or towards the south of this diverse and vast country lies the great Indian Ocean region. And then the Maldives, are right there in the middle of the Indian Ocean region. So all these factors, especially the geography, and then the historic, if not centuries, decades, we've had this excellent relation, especially even in the defense and security cooperation dimension, we've had excellent relations. So all these factors bind our two countries together. And then we've seen, especially with the new government and leadership coming in, and then Honorable Prime Minister Modi swearing in for the second time, we've seen a significant momentum within the cooperation between the two countries. And then there has been a paradigm shift as far as our security cooperation is concerned. So which is comforting to us, and having such cooperation and such multifaceted and multifold, multidimensional cooperation with a larger democratic country is a matter of undoubtedly comfort to us.
You're talking about the operationalization of what had been talked about in the past, especially in January. How far has that progressed, and what are you talking about in specific? Last time you were telling us about the first phase of the coastal radar as well, which was inaugurated by your president and the Prime Minister, as well
Yes.
as a,
Yes.
a training facility.
Yes, to put it into context, first of all, the Indo-Maldives relation, especially in the arena of defense and security cooperation, it is a multifold engagement. We have cooperation in the form of exchange of high-level visits. We have cooperation in the form of providing support and assistance to build infrastructure and then capacity building of the armed forces, and more importantly, operational capacity building of the armed forces. So we discussed about further putting impetus into the ongoing programs, and then also we talked about more coherent, more practical mechanisms, how we could incorporate further dynamism into these activities. For example, if we look at the radar program, radars is of utmost importance, and these radars have been ongoing for quite a while, and we feel the use of the radars is important to Maldives than any other country, because it gives us the capability to undertake surveillance and detection. It helps us with it. So the radar, we've discussed how we could expedite the radar installments, and we've formally commissioned 2 radars when the Honorable Prime Minister came. And then there are other programs such as in the arena of training, how we could educate senior military officers on the current trends. Military professional education is a key priority. And at the same time, other joint exercises, joint training programs, and of course the capacity building and infrastructure development. You might be able to recall that for years we've had assistance and support from the Indian military establishment in building and constituting the composite training center, which is placed in Mafilafushi, which is a joint training center which provides fundamental basic training for the Marines, the Coast Guard, and other support services. So we are seeing it was also formally inaugurated when the Prime Minister came. So we are looking how we could sort of put more dynamism, and at the operational level, how we could, at the military level, how we could ensure that things are done in a much more planned manner, based on time schedules, based on in a much more structured way.
And one of the primary concerns that the Maldives has was of indigenous repair and refit facility in terms of your Coast Guard ships, instead of them lying or waiting for refit or coming to India or going elsewhere. Well, how much has that progressed?
We've had a quite detailed press briefing prior to coming to India. This question kept on arising on and off. We've explained the requirement for the Maldives Coast Guard to develop the capacity to indigenously carry out maintenance and repairing. So we have the requirement. We are a country with a vast EEZ and a maritime zone, and the role of the Coast Guard in terms of monitoring and keeping an efficient vigil of the EEZ is of prime importance. So because we cannot have the inshore and offshore patrol vessels round the clock running without having a practical and a much more established repair facility. So we need to develop this capacity within the MNDF, within the security forces. So we are in a process of studying how we could have our own repair facility, which one of the choices, one of the suggestions that have come up is the UTF. If we could have a repair, Coast Guard repair facility there with minimum docking facilities, repair facilities, within alongside berthing facility, would be a major primary heap to our operations.
How far has that progressed?
Well, we are currently in the surveying and an exploring phase. We should be able to come out with terms of reference, and we should be able to come up with how we plan to do that.
another similarity where you were talking about culture, historical ties, geography between India and the Maldives is the political scenario in terms of the opposition almost being decimated both in India and in the Maldives. But whatever opposition there still is, consistently and constantly keeps raising this issue of the Indian given helicopters, which are of course operated by the MNDF whenever they need for humanitarian assistance. Has that been sorted out domestically?
Well, I think the story of the helicopter has become an old story.
Yes.
But
they keep raising it.
But then people have realized, people are more aware now, and it's on our part to keep people more aware on the tangible humanitarian role the helicopters have been employed.
Well, completely under command of the MNDF.
Well, very much so, very much so. And if you even go through the letters of exchange, it is very clear. It is, and then these we have, most of them are technical staff, and we get calls from the community, from people in distress round the clock, and these helicopters have been extensively used. And at certain point in time, in fact, we get worried that whether these helicopters are being overused or not. So because again, maintenance of these helicopters are challenging. But we are at the same time exploring the options of training our own pilots and technical staff. So there has been some understanding, and the talks have been ongoing. But what we need to take out of this is these helicopters are of immense use, and we've been around the clock carrying medical evacuations. And the medical evacuations, we carry people really in medical distress. So there is a need for a country such as Maldives with a tough geographical terrain of the fragmented nature.
Do you need more? Is there any talks on that?
Well, you see even the two helicopters at the moment, but we need to develop the operational capacity, the reach to the far-flung islands. That's what we constantly sense. There is a need. There is an immense need within the security agencies to expand and to reach out to far-flung islands, especially in case of crisis.
Another need was for something that's already been agreed on, that's the Dornier. And earlier when we spoke to in January, you said it was just the infrastructure that was being put in place. So what's the status of that?
You see, we have been for years, now we have been undertaking surveillance operations. We have a structured arrangement as far as the maritime surveillance of our EEZ is concerned, which involves joint maritime as well as aerial surveillance using Indian platforms and Maldivian platforms. Jointly we've been undertaking, and each and every time we've had the assistance. We've used a Dornier. So you see, having a Dornier is something not new. We've been using Dorniers, and if you
have pilots who can operate.
Yes, if you look at the recent security operations, which had elevated into a quite high level, we've used Dorniers. And then there is this requirement to have constant surveillance. We have not yet decided about anything about Dornier as yet, I mean in detail, but the requirement is pressing for surveillance because we cannot be focusing our security efforts only to Greater Malé area. Because constantly we talk about hybrid threats, we constantly talk about these, the challenges of our vast maritime domain. And so there's a greater need to create maritime domain awareness. There's no doubt about it. And then, understanding the depths of these menaces of the greater Indian Ocean region. I was referring to IOU, for example, during our last interview. I was talking about illegal, unreported, unregistered fishing. We had recently many fishing trawlers venturing into a big fleet of fishing trawlers venturing into our EEZ. So when we talk about surveillance, there are two aspects to it. One is, of course, having the detection capacity, and then the second aspect of it is having and is constituting the capacity to intercept. So, not having either of the capabilities leave us with quite a range of vulnerabilities. And today we talk about hybrid threats, we talk about non-state actors, we talk about rogue elements, illicit trafficking. So there is a concern. There is a concern. There is a concern to consolidate and make our security structures more robust.
When you were talking about fishing or trawlers coming into your waters, I believe there's still a lot of engagement with the Indian Navy in terms of, last time also you had gone to the IFC IOR with the IMAC, which tracks white shipping and if you need
Yes.
any help. But apart from those kind of, you were talking about how you had dealt with the press before coming here on various issues. And since you're talking about rogue elements, in the run-up post what happened in Sri Lanka, there was a huge amount of exercises that the MNDF and the police and the security forces carried out. And some of those pictures were pretty incredible because I've never seen armed people on the streets of Malé, but it is a necessity.
Yes.
And you talked about radicalization a lot.
Yes.
How big a worry is that, considering how there have been reports? Your own counterterrorism center says about 69 people may have gone to Syria or Iraq to work to fight with the IS or Daesh. Other reports suggest upwards of 200. How much of a fear is radicalization in the Maldives?
Yeah. You have, I think, touched upon many areas in one question,
Yeah.
but I think it's critical to know the depths of it. First of all, at the national level, at the top level, at the apex level, there have been considerable efforts in developing our security sector. So there's a lot of efforts that's ongoing on security sector reform and security sector development. And a large chunk of security sector reform focuses on countering terrorism. And then recently on the Maldives Partnership Forum, we all have elaborated that we do not want to terrorism, we do not address or perceive terrorism as a standalone concept. Of course, there is this lone wolf concept in it, but then we want to look at it in a much more holistic manner. And when we look at the dynamics of terrorism, we want to understand whether there is an underlying stronger ideology that supports the terrorism. So looking at what happened in Sri Lanka, it's alarming. The magnitude of it is lethal. So and something happens to Sri Lanka means it's quite disastrous for us as well. It will have its implication on us. It's quite unfortunate this happened, and so there is a need, and especially if you look at the context of Maldives, our situation is a little bit different because our terrain itself is different. Our broader operational continuum itself, the spectrum itself, is much more diverse and difficult. So taking within the premise of this broader challenging setting, we need to understand terrorism in a much more holistic manner. So we've started exploring this, and an important part of this the effort is empowering the NCTC first and foremost. The NCTC is the nodal agency that addresses terrorism, create awareness, bring all the agencies together, and develop multi-agency, multi-government, whole of society approaches. So there are two dimensions to it. One is the preventional and countering aspect to it, and the other aspect to it is the responsive and the enforcement and the responsive element to it. So taking this into consideration, we are in a process of reviewing the counterterrorism law. The Attorney General has taken the initiative, and then he's coordinating.
Police might get
yes,
more
the police part. And police will have, as far as the enforcement and investigations, the arrests and everything, all these are concerned, police will have a tangible role. And then we the armed forces at the extreme end of the spectrum, we would be employed on a much more responsive role. So we need to develop that kinetic. So these two dimensions, the softer dimension as well as the kinetic, harder dimensions, need to be employed in tandem, need to go hand in hand simultaneously. So we are working on that to sort of to make our counterterrorism effort much more structured, efficient, and then responsive. And looking at the issue of radicalization, it is a problem. It is a problem not only in the Maldives. It is a problem in South Asian region. It is a problem in the whole world. So the necessary government agencies are taking precautionary measures, and then in fact not only precautionary measures, well, in fact, how we could have mechanisms to attend and address this
Prevent
issue
that
of
kind.
and prevent radicalization, understanding the nuances, understanding the norms of it. So there have been a lot of effort that has been pulled off at the softer dimension, meaning other ministries like the youth ministry, for example, the education ministry, and Islamic ministry itself. So there is a need and requirement to counter more, violent, extremist, radical ideologies. It might be difficult for me to, comment not the exact numbers on that as far as those who have gone. It's quite, everybody's aware on it. But then we are putting considerable effort as far as the issue of countering terrorism is concerned.
We're talking about the nuances, and like you pointed out, Maldives straddles a key sea lane in the Indian Ocean. Now, when you're talking about the Indo-Pacific construct, where does the Maldives see itself, especially how India is engaging with the other major powers in this Indo-Pacific? The US has also changed, called it Indo-Pacific now.
It's very interesting. It's a very interesting. I think it is the the theme and the cliche of the day when we talk about Indo-Pacific construct, when we talk about Indo-Pacific strategy. It is gaining recognition world over. And then I had the opportunity of meeting some of the senior officers when I attended the LANPEC conference in Hawaii. Quite recently, I had met with General Brown, who happens to command the U.S. Army Pacific Command. And then, in fact, the deputy commander is a serving Australian general in the U.S. Army. So that shows the need for multinational cooperation, that shows the need for creating partnerships. And in fact, some of the people I met, they talked about, they are quite clear about the Pacific segment of it, but they're not very clear about the Indo part of it. So it is very interesting. It is in an experimental phase. But then when we talk about Indo-Pacific strategy, yeah, we are also in the picture of it, because you see, one of the fundamental tenets, one of the fundamental underlying principles of, as I see it, Indo-Pacific strategy is the economic collaboration and reaping the economic benefits through intense cooperation. And then the second dimension of Indo-Pacific strategy is focusing on good governance, creating rule-based international systems.
Yes.
And then
bringing everyone complies with those rules.
Yes, bringing everybody together. Sort of sidelining rogue and unconventional approaches. So it is a healthy thinking, as I see it. And thirdly, of course, it is the security. Enhancing mutual security and cooperation. So it is a multidimensional, multifaceted, holistic approach as far as and its alignment. I would say that Maldives would be very, very keen to, but then it's the foreign policy makers to make a decision on that, not for a person in uniform.
Sure. The Indian government itself has made it clear repeatedly that when we're talking about the Indo-Pacific construct, it's not something that is going to be used against any one country, though we know what we're talking about. It's for everybody to gain from that. What about fears that were there in India about China cooperating in the Maldives? There was a lot of reports on a sea observation post that the Chinese were going to set up, and a lot of worries about that.
Within the context of Indo-Pacific construct, China remains a key, development partner for many countries, and a strong economic giant. So that factor has been, even by the US, that factor has been taken into construct, the emerging China, especially in terms of its growth, economic growth. That factor has been taken into consideration. And so for all our regional members, even I think India does a relatively large chunk of trade with China. So is Sri Lanka, and so is Maldives too. And then when we talk about specifically military presence, and military presence again is a multi-layered issue, sort of. And then we do not have a Chinese military presence in the Maldives, strong presence.
Like
or
you
even
in your press conference said,
Yes,
you
I
had
have-
no
no intention.
no Indian base
Maldives,
either.
Yes, Maldives says no. But then there is this interdependent nature when it comes to security matters. For example, most of the hybrid threats in the contemporary security predicament spans across borders, spills over. So there is a need to collaborate. There is a need to collaborate within the like-minded countries to deal with these hybrid transnational threats. So on that note, we the Maldives also would need to collaborate. We cannot stay in isolation because we have a huge maritime zone. We are quite exposed to, and especially after what happened in Sri Lanka, it was quite unfortunate. We are working towards having minimum security standards for even resorts. We have these high-end tourist resorts in the Maldives. So the police has taken the initiative. A lot of credit to police. Police is collaborating with other stake agencies and communicating with the tourism sector to have minimum security standards implemented within the resorts. So it is an era of cooperation, collaboration, and
Not confrontation.
Not confrontation. Absolutely. So in that context, we are open. We are open as far as the security, defense and security of Maldives is concerned. We want to think ahead. We want to be proactive and preemptive rather than being reactive or facing something and then learn the price or the cost of it in a much more disastrous manner.
Looking forward, and since India and the Maldives have had such high-level meetings from the top onwards, military to defense ministers, is there any move to say revive India-Maldives NSA level talks, maybe even include Sri Lanka, and then like we had in 2014, maybe even Seychelles, Mauritius at that level?
These have been floated even a few years back. The idea of having more collaboration on national security issues, and the way each country approaches its national security is again different. It in itself is a challenge. But then having a common consensus and a common understanding on national security issues will be vital. And I think in that regard, this kind of collaboration and a more a multi-layered, multinational national security. But an important segment of the security sector development efforts is focusing on counterterrorism. But having said that, there are efforts that are being put to conceptualize our national security efforts, understanding what do we really mean by sovereignty, what do we really mean by national security when it comes to small states, what do we mean by protecting our national security and sovereignty. So these are important questions that we truly need to raise and then conceptualize national security to protect the sovereignty and security of our country will remain a key policy objective of the country.
General Shamaal, again, it was an absolute pleasure talking to you, and hopefully we'll see you back in Malé soon.
Thank you very much. It has been a pleasure.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.